with the interesting result that the background level of radiation in this very room is 9 times what it was a year ago. Don't you know that? 9 times. We're all doomed, you know.
Before apocalyptic films became blockbusters, before nuclear anxiety turned into entertainment, before movies dared to show humanity's end without hope, there was On the Beach. Released in 1959, this devastating masterpiece didn't just scare audiences, it forced the world to confront its darkest fear. Stanley Kramer took a best-selling novel about the end of civilization and turned it into a cinematic warning that world leaders couldn't ignore. But behind every empty street and radiation cloud, a production filled with reluctant stars, political controversy, and secrets that revealed just how dangerous it was to make a film about the unthinkable. These are 15 weird facts about On the Beach, the movie that proved sometimes the most important stories are the ones nobody wants to hear. Before we dive into the countdown, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss our deep dives into classic cinema. And if you're loving this already, go ahead and hype this video. It helps more movie fans discover these hidden stories. Now let's get into it. Number 15. Nevil Shute was disappointed with the film adaptation. The author who inspired millions had mixed feelings about the movie version. Despite worldwide acclaim and box office success, novelist Nevil Shute was displeased with Kramer's adaptation of his book. He felt it was too focused on the love story between Gardner and Peck, while missing the cold, documentary-style realism he'd painstakingly crafted in the novel. Shute had written On the Beach as a clinical examination of humanity's final days, stripped of sentiment and melodrama. Kramer gave it Hollywood gloss, swelling music and close-ups of beautiful stars looking tragically into the distance. The author provided minimal assistance during production, clearly uncomfortable with how his stark warning was being transformed. The irony? The film reached millions more people than his book ever could, spreading his anti-nuclear message to audiences who would never have picked up the novel. Sometimes the messenger matters less than the message getting through. Number 14. The Cast's Hotel became a film landmark, where Hollywood royalty waited for the apocalypse. The entire cast and crew stayed at Melbourne's Hotel Windsor during the months-long shoot, transforming the elegant Victorian hotel into an impromptu film colony. Ava Gardner held court in the lobby, Fred Astaire practiced dance steps in the ballroom, and Gregory Peck brooded over scripts in the dining room. The hotel staff treated them like visiting dignitaries, even as the actors played characters waiting to die. Decades later, the Windsor still promotes its On the Beach connection, with photos in the hallways and plaques commemorating where Hollywood came to film The End of the World. Tourist book rooms hoping to sleep where Ava Gardner once stayed, as if proximity to movie history could somehow make the ordinary extraordinary. The hotel became its own kind of monument, not to the film's bleakness but to the strange glamour that surrounds even our darkest stories. Number 13. The film used a real Royal Navy submarine. When authenticity required the real thing, Kramer needed a submarine for the film's centerpiece, and the Royal Navy provided HMS Andrew, a real wartime submarine. The vessel and its crew participated fully in the production, with actual naval personnel appearing in scenes throughout the film. Officers and sailors lent their expertise and presence, giving sequences an authenticity that studio mock-ups could never achieve. The cooperation from military personnel was remarkable given the film's grim premise, trained defenders participating in a story that showed no defense could stop radiation. You can see it in the documentary-style realism of submarine interiors. These aren't elaborate sets, but the real cramped quarters where men actually served. Number 12. The film had an unprecedented Moscow screening. Hollywood weaponized cinema for peace. Stanley Kramer pulled off something unprecedented in Cold War cinema. He arranged for On the Beach to screen in Moscow at a workers' club, attended by 1,200 Soviet dignitaries and officials. The screening wasn't about box office or awards. It was calculated propaganda for nuclear disarmament, using the emotional power of cinema to bypass political barriers. Kramer believed that showing people the end of everything might shock them into preventing it. The film also premiered simultaneously in 18 cities worldwide on December 17, 1959, creating a global conversation about nuclear war. Whether it changed any minds is impossible to know, but it marked one of the first times a Hollywood film was deliberately deployed as a political statement across both sides of the Iron Curtain. Cinema had become a weapon in the Cold War, and Kramer was aiming it at audiences everywhere. Number 11. Melbourne's transformation launched Australian cinema, the city that became the world's graveyard. Before On the Beach, Melbourne was relatively unknown to American audiences. Kramer changed that by transforming the Australian city into humanity's final refuge, flooding its streets with cameras and international stars. The production pumped money into the local economy and gave Melbourne global visibility it had never experienced. Local businesses appeared in backgrounds, landmarks became recognizable, and suddenly this distant city was the center of cinematic apocalypse. The film helped establish Australia as a legitimate filming destination, paving the way for decades of international productions. Melbourne learned it could play itself on screen and still look exotic to foreign audiences. The city became famous for being the last place on Earth, which is either the darkest tourism campaign imaginable or proof that any publicity works. Number 10. Stanley Kramer protected the ending obsessively, paranoia that matched the film's themes. Kramer was determined to preserve the emotional impact of the ending, so he filmed the devastating final sequence, empty streets, abandoned buildings, that banner reading "There is still time" flapping in toxic wind, with careful control over information. He understood that his film's power depended on audiences experiencing the full weight of its conclusion without spoilers. The secrecy worked. When theaters finally showed those desolate streets and audiences realized everyone was gone, they sat in shocked silence. No Hollywood ending. No last-minute salvation. Just emptiness and that banner, still promising time that had already run out. We've uncovered reluctant stars, political controversy, and a film that dared to show the unthinkable, but the most revealing secrets are still ahead. From the director who wouldn't compromise, to the star who defied typecasting. The top 9 facts will reveal just how far Kramer pushed to make the world face its nightmare. So before we count down to number 1, make sure you're subscribed, and drop a comment telling us which fact has surprised you most so far. Number 9. The actors were emotionally drained. Method directing taken to psychological extremes. Stanley Kramer didn't want his actors pretending to face the apocalypse. He wanted them feeling it in their bones. So he deliberately kept the cast focused on the script's bleakness for months during the Australian shoot. Ava Gardner later called it the most emotionally exhausting film of her career, and she'd worked with everyone from Sinatra to Hemingway. The fatigue you see on screen isn't just acting, it's real exhaustion seeping through professional performances. Kramer believed authentic emotion came from genuine immersion in the material. Every tired glance, every moment of resignation, every scene where hope dies in someone's eyes, that's people who'd spent months thinking about nuclear extinction, and it shows in every frame. Number 8. Ava Gardner's infamous quote was fabricated. When fiction became famous fact, one of the most repeated stories about the production that Ava Gardner said Melbourne was the perfect place to make a film about the end of the world, never actually happened. The quote was invented by Australian journalist Neil Gillett and published years after filming wrapped. Gardner never said it, but the quote was so perfect, so wickedly quotable that it spread as gospel truth. Melbourne residents repeated it with a mixture of pride and indignation. Newspapers printed it as fact. Tour guides still mention it decades later. The fake quote became more famous than anything Gardner actually said about the production. Sometimes the best stories about movies are the ones that never happened. They just feel like they should have. Number 7. The film's message angered some officials. Political fallout from celluloid radiation. Some American officials privately criticized On the Beach, viewing it as promoting nuclear defeatism at a time when projecting strength was considered essential to Cold War strategy. The film's premise that nuclear war means everyone dies, no exceptions, no winners, contradicted official government messaging about survivable conflict and civil defense. The movie became politically controversial in some circles, with critics arguing it undermined morale. Kramer refused every suggestion to soften his message. He'd made exactly the film he intended, unflinching truth about nuclear consequences. The criticism proved he'd struck a nerve. Some leaders could tolerate entertainment, but not when entertainment challenged comfortable assumptions about winning nuclear wars. Number 6. Stanley Kramer refused a Hollywood happy ending. The director who wouldn't blink. MGM executives were nervous when they saw Kramer's final cut. Everyone dies. No heroic sacrifice that saves humanity. No last-minute cure discovered by brave scientists. Just slow, inevitable extinction. Studio pressure mounted to add something hopeful. Maybe survivors rebuilding. Children playing under clean skies. Anything audiences could leave theaters feeling better about. Kramer's response was uncompromising. There is no happy ending in nuclear war. He refused to alter his vision. The studio could release his version or shelve the film entirely. They released it. Kramer's determination gave audiences something Hollywood rarely provided: respect for their intelligence and honesty about consequences. The ending isn't satisfying. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to linger, to make viewers leave theaters thinking about what they'd witnessed. Number 5. Locals found filming unsettling. When fiction felt too real. Melbourne residents who participated as extras or watched filming reported genuinely uncomfortable feelings, particularly during scenes showing empty streets and citizens conducting gas mask drills. The line between performance and reality blurred. These weren't studio sets dressed to look apocalyptic. These were real neighborhoods evacuated for cameras, real streets that would actually be deserted if the film's premise came true. Some locals admitted the experience was deeply unnerving, that pretending to prepare for nuclear fallout while cameras rolled felt like rehearsing for a plausible future. Australia felt vulnerable, geographically isolated, potentially helpless if superpowers started launching missiles. The film set became a mirror showing what extinction might actually look like, and the reflection disturbed everyone who saw it. Number 4. Gregory Peck brought gravitas to impossible material. The moral center of the apocalypse. Gregory Peck's casting as Commander Dwight Towers was crucial to the film's success. Known for playing men of integrity and quiet strength, Peck brought exactly the weathered dignity the role demanded. He played a naval officer trying to maintain military discipline and human decency while knowing everyone would die. That contradiction, professionalism in the face of meaninglessness, required an actor who could convey internal conflict without melodrama. Peck delivered that complexity in every scene, making Towers simultaneously a man of duty and a man watching duty become pointless. His performance anchored the film's emotional center, giving audiences someone to trust even as the world fell apart around him. Number 3. Anthony Perkins filmed it before Psycho, the romantic lead who became a horror icon. When audiences met Perkins as the sweet, earnest Lieutenant Towers in On the Beach, they saw a young man capable of tenderness and ordinary heroism. Less than a year later, Hitchcock's Psycho transformed him into Norman Bates, forever changing how viewers perceived that gentle face. But On the Beach captured something that disappeared after Psycho. Perkins playing a character uncomplicated by darkness, just a decent person trying to find meaning before the end. That performance became a time capsule, preserving a version of Perkins that could never exist again after audiences learned what he was capable of portraying. The timing was accidental but perfect. First the romantic sailor, then the killer in the motel. Two roles that together defined the range of one of cinema's most underrated talents. Number 2. Fred Astaire's dramatic transformation. The role that redefined a legend. Fred Astaire's casting as the cynical scientist Julian Osborne represented a massive risk for both actor and director. Astaire had spent decades perfecting the persona of effortless grace and charm through dance, becoming one of Hollywood's most beloved entertainers. On the Beach offered him something completely different, dramatic weight, a character who faces oblivion with wit instead of fear, a chance to prove he could act without choreography. Astaire brought unexpected depth to Osborne, playing despair and alcoholic resignation with the same precision he'd once brought to dance numbers. The casting became one of Kramer's smartest decisions, giving audiences the shock of seeing a familiar face in unfamiliar emotional territory. Astaire wasn't dancing his way out of this one. Nobody was dancing their way out. Number 1. The film's power lives in its restraint. Less is devastatingly more. On the Beach didn't need explosions, didn't need action sequences, didn't need special effects to show humanity's end. It needed empty streets, tired faces, and the quiet realization that some mistakes can't be fixed. The haunting subplot about the Morse code signal from San Diego, the mysterious transmission that suggests someone might still be alive, triggering that desperate submarine mission, creates a glimmer of hope that makes the ending more devastating. The signal was just a Coke bottle caught in a window shade, swinging in the wind, randomly tapping out code that sounded like human intelligence. That detail became the perfect metaphor for the film's worldview. We desperately want to believe someone's out there, that there's still time. But sometimes hope is just wind and randomness, and the lies we tell ourselves to make extinction bearable. Stanley Kramer made audiences sit with their extinction, refusing to look away or pretend it could end any other way. Decades later, as nuclear arsenals still exist and new threats emerge, the film's warning hasn't aged a day. So which of these 15 facts shocked you the most? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden stories from the golden age of movie magic. Because if there's one thing On the Beach taught us, it's that some films refuse to fade away, especially the ones that show us what we're most afraid to see.